Coloring comics really bring them to life, and for me, there's something really zen about coloring comics. So grab your meditation pillows and let's color some comics. Hey, Walter here, and we are back with the fourth video in making a webtoon from start to finish. We've already done the writing, the thumbnailing, the penciling. We still have to do the formatting and the lettering and the uploading, but today we are going to be doing the colors. Now, I don't know about you, but my artwork does not look right until I've added colors, so it has to be done. I know there are some artists out there that do amazing black and white artwork, almost to the point to where I wish they wouldn't color it, but for my artwork specifically, it has to be colored, otherwise it just looks wrong to me. How do you feel about the whole color versus black and white? Do you prefer color, or does it really depend on the artist who is doing it? For me, it depends on the artist who is doing it. Now, before we jump into the video, I gotta say, coloring is this huge, massive topic that has all kinds of different information, so there's no way I could cover it in a single video. Even if I wanted to, I don't have all of that knowledge. So take this as a starter and move from there. There are also a ton of different techniques and ways and methods to color comics. I'm gonna show you mine. I will try to explain everything I do, but if there's something you don't understand, or if you have a different way of doing it, let me know in the comments and I will try to do my best to explain it or do a more in-depth video. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into coloring the comic that we've been working on in the past videos. Okay, so we're going to be working on the comic that we started in the last 3 videos. So if you haven't seen any of this and you want to check out the thumbnailing, the layouts, or the penciling, go back and check those videos out and then come back and see how we do the coloring. Okay, so when I start off, I like to lay down a base mood environment color. So in this case, we're gonna start with purple, and I'm gonna use that to base all of my colors off of that for the scene and the mood of it. And that way, it makes it easier to find harmonious colors within the scene so things don't stick out or look garish, or this color. Like when you're coloring, you don't want to make the sky blue and the grass green. I've talked about this before. Depending on the time of day, the grass might be more orange or more blue at nighttime. So the environment, everything that's going on in the environment affects the other colors. So here I colored Joe. I put him in green, and I'm putting the environment or his ship kind of in this rusty brown, red, orange, because the red and the green kind of play against each other. They're complement colors, which means they're on opposite sides of the color wheel. So they work really well together and they provide a lot of contrast against each other, so things really stick out. So here you can see I'm using the lasso tool to select all the colors, and I'm just laying down the base colors here. Clip Studio has a great paint bucket tool that's smart, where it just knows where your lines are and it fills it in for you. So you should definitely learn how to use that. I've done some more in-depth like how to do coloring videos, the technical side. Now here I'm laying down shadows, so I create a layer on top of the flats, which is just a duplicate of that. And then I go in and I just start doing lasso selections where I think the shadows would land. It's kind of like a really quick way of doing cell shading like they do in anime. It's just really quick to do. It looks good, even if it isn't quite right. It's still easy to make it look cool. And I try not to worry too much about the shadows, the realism or the realisticness of how the light would be playing. I always think about what will make the character or the scene look the coolest, the most dramatic. So here I'm putting all the shades on this side of his body. And within a scene, I'll keep this accurate. And if I can, I'll keep it accurate through the entire scene. But if not, like if there's a scene or a panel that would look cooler with the light being in a different direction, I'll go ahead and do that, even if it is different than the rest of the scene, just because it will look cooler. And at the end of the day, that's what I think is most important. So with adding shadows like this, when I do the lasso select, I'm using a hue shift, which is that right there. Now what you want to do is you want to darken it, but also saturate it a little bit more and then shift the colors. I usually shift the color to a cooler color like a blue or a purple. You don't want to just add black to your shadows, because if you do that, your colors are going to start to look muddy. Like, shadows aren't just adding black to that base color. Really what's happening is it's getting cooler. It doesn't always have to be cooler. If you want to make a warmer color, you can do that. Sometimes that has really cool effects. Here I just added a glow to that comet, which is just adding another layer and just dropping in like a circular gradient. And here I'm adding another glow, which is just a different layer on top of my colors. I'm just using a gradient and just adding that glow. It's a really quick, simple way to add glows or energy. So just mess around with that. Like I said, it's just another layer. Sometimes I'll lower the opacity if it gets too bright, but otherwise, so that's our first page. And here's a little trick where you can add a hue saturation adjustment layer and basically make everything grayscale. And now that's gonna show you the contrast. Like if you had black versus white, the contrast would be really high. But if you have two middle grays, you're not gonna be able to tell the difference in grayscale. So you can come in and use the grayscale to figure out what pieces are really contrasty. Like if you want Joe to stick out, everything else around him should be darker. So it's a really cool trick. So now we're just moving on to the next one, doing the exact same thing, just tossing in the flats. Now, once I set up a scene like I did on the first page or the first file, it's a lot quicker to do the rest of that scene because I can just color pick. I use the color picker, grab the colors from that, and I can just drop it into the scene. I don't have to figure out what color Joe's shirt should be or what color the seats are. So I just come in, do all of this stuff, and much quicker. And then now for Syndra's ship, I have to figure out all these colors that we haven't done before. So basically I just start selecting things, and I'm gonna use that hue shift to change the colors, shift the hue and the saturation until it looks right, until it feels good. Now this could be different for everybody else, and you might learn more as you move forward to work what works for you. So now I'm just adding the shadows. I select the shadow, shift the hue to something cooler, increase the saturation and lower it. You don't always have to increase the saturation. It's gonna depend on what else is going on in the scene. Sometimes, like if you're shifting and the scene is mostly red and orange here, if I increase the saturation of a purple or blue, it would look too intense. So here I'm just adding more shadows. Because she's like an evil villain, I'm putting her face in shadow because that's a little bit more ominous. So anytime you want to make a character look ominous, you can put shadows on the front of their face, kind of like they're looking into the darkness. It's also good if you want to draw characters that might be scared or nervous. Just adding some more glow. I'm doing some glow in the back. And here I'm just figuring out the space, adding some glow in the ship to make things look a little bit more visually interesting. Having the glow from the TV from the first file really helps to establish everything within the scene, and it draws more attention to that TV. Otherwise, people might not have seen it in the first. And here, just go through the exact same thing, just laying down the base colors, going through, using the lasso tool. That was a trick that I used to where if you put a marquee or a box selection around one of the panels, then you can use the magic wand tool to select or deselect outside of that panel, and it lets you select everything within that panel so you can fill it in with a color that's different than the gutter space, which makes it a lot easier to do your selections because then you can select outside of the panel but not have to deselect that area. And here I'm using the grayscale again to see what's popping, what's working, if it's shifting out enough. And here you can see like I'm doing all of this coloring with this grayscale on. The reason I'm able to do this is because I am color picking from the last file. I figured out all the colors for Syndra, so I don't have to figure them out anymore. I'm just color picking from the last file and dropping it into the new file. Now, if you look at the top panel and the bottom panel there, you can see I'm doing these inverted V shapes or A shaped shadows in the background. Now, this doesn't really make sense for the scene. Like, I don't know where that light is actually coming from. It could be like an overhead light that we don't see, and that's what's casting those shadows, but it's not really defined at all. But what's really good about those inverted V shapes is that it helps draw attention to the object of that panel. And you can see I was doing it in that panel too. It just helps draw the eye down. So I will do that a lot in panels, even if it doesn't make sense. And it's not really something that somebody's gonna notice. All right, I think this is our last page, just going and filling in the space again. I made that area bright where Joe's ship is to really draw attention to Joe's ship. And just adding some glow, going in here, putting down my flats again really quick, and just using a lot of the same stuff here. Now with Syndra being in the background, we want to be able to see her and draw attention. We also want to bring Joe into the foreground. So instead of using like the shadows I used everywhere else, I'm going to make his shadows and his colors darker to really bring him towards the camera. And it doesn't always have to be a darker color to make it closer to the camera. Sometimes you can use a lighter color, but most of the times it's going to be a darker color the closer you want to make the object feel to the camera. And here I'm adding another shadow by Joe's face to really bring Joe's face, increase the contrast for that. And that's it. That's how you color a Webtoon comic. Simple, right? Okay, so I know that was a lot of information to go through and the video was going really fast. That process probably took me about 30 minutes per file. So I don't know, what is that, 2.5 hours to color that, but I'm really practiced at doing it. And it was a pretty simple scene overall, so it wasn't overly complicated. Like I said, that was a lot of information, but the main things to take away from that is paying attention to the play of colors against each other, complementary colors against each other to really help make things pop, and also using that grayscale to see how the contrast is from black to white to gray, and making sure things pop like that. If everything is too much in the middle gray area, it's gonna look washed out and not very exciting. So the more dark versus light colors that you can add is gonna make things more poppy, more vibrant, and easier to read, which is really important. There's also another theory about 70-30 or 80-20, which is you want 80% dark versus 20% light, or vice versa, 20% dark versus 80% light, and that will help make the panel look interesting. I don't always pay attention to that. I'm just more concerned about, like, if Joe is in the scene and Joe is the important thing, that he pops off of whatever else is in the scene. And so if that means I need to darken something darker than what it was in another panel, I'll do that, and I'll sacrifice the realism or the accuracy to make a better panel that reads more easily for the reader. So make sure you sub to catch the rest of this series on how we're taking a nothing all the way to a finished Webtoon comic, and then also for all of the other comic and art related videos I'm doing. So hit that sub button, and always be sure to like, link, love, hug, and sub for more sweet, sweet goodness. Peace.